Good evening and welcome back to the shop tonight. I want to talk about some of the explorations I've been doing, not incredibly deep dive, but some of you know that I have this little electric guitar project that I have been gathering information on for far too long. And I won't be making it out of curly maple, but I've been looking in on a lot of guitar websites and trying to get the inside scoop on what some of the procedures are to make, first the neck of the guitar, and there's a lot of complexity and new tools, which is always fun. And being the first one, you really want to gather enough information before you go. But one of the interesting aspects of electric guitar making is the finish, and most companies go to some lengths to put beautiful wood on the face of the hard body electric guitar. And one company that in particular stands out to me is the PRS, Paul Reed Smith guitar makers. And they started out with just a few simple kind of elementary colors. But over the years, they've had this color team or custom color department that has developed these vibrant, like crazy colors, and they're beautiful. I mean, I don't know why I didn't think of this sooner, because I've looked at those guitars hanging on the wall. There's a great place not too far from us that displays them all, and they're so beautiful. All these colors, like you can get green and red and yellows, and then there's these sunburst patterns, and it's just really, really nice. And they get the figure to pop on their curly maple like nobody else. So they've like really honed in on this topic that we think about sometimes in furniture making. Like when you make something out of curly maple, maybe you'd like to see that finish really pop. So I've been borrowing some of the techniques from the guitar makers. And one of the great things, you probably want to check this out too, because you like watching things on YouTube, but you can check out PRS guitars. There are several videos that are just about the finish, and that's what spoke a lot into what I'm going to show you tonight. So I tried to distill it down, and I want to take some of the principles that they use on their guitars and then shift and start working on some new ideas for finishing furniture. Mainly we're getting the concepts down for some maybe new techniques to you. They are to me. So we're kind of together in this, getting these concepts, and it won't be like a paint by number formula like here's the safest finish. That's to come. That is going to come. But I'm like in the kitchen, like stirring the pot, throwing in the ingredients. And I wanted to bring you in along on that ride with me. So we're going to check out some cool finishes. But before we do, we need to talk about the material itself. And we're going to be working with curly maple. I've got some sample boards here, and I've already prepped them and sanded them. I got little spots on them, so but can you see the figure in there? If I move it like that, can you see it moving? Mm-hmm. This is solid. I just ripped, I resawed on the bandsaw a thicker chunk of some nicely grained curly, and made a bunch of sample boards. And then I also took some fiddleback veneer, and I veneered it to this 1/2-inch plywood to show you how it will work on veneer as well. So I've got some samples here. And then I also have a couple samples of the big leaf maple. Look at that. The big leaf maple was featured as the top and drawer fronts of our contemporary writing desk project, which we did recently. And on the finish for that, what I used was a basic oil finish. So the oil absorbed in, and over the application of the final coats, it just brought that figure out into an incredible chatoyance is the correct word, actually. It's C-H-A-T. In French is
cat.
Cat, thank you. And oi is eye. So cat's eye, chatoyance. So you get that chatoyance, you get that cat's eye, that kind of deep reflection. And you've seen also, maybe you've seen cat's eye stones, that you get that kind of look. But I brought over actually the contemporary writing desk so we could just...
We called it the modern writing desk, just so...
Oh, sorry, the modern writing desk.
Because we have the contemporary round table.
I'm sorry, yeah, you're right.
Don't want to confuse everything.
So we got the top here, is all that big leaf maple. And this is a quilted type, or actually, I'm never sure sometimes whether you would call it blistered, because you see all these circles, they are like blisters on the surface. Quilted, I think it's almost more of a woven pattern. This is sort of like in the middle. There's some quilted appearance, but it has a blistered look as well. Then you have the drawer fronts are really highly figured. Can you see the figure moving?
Yes.
And that's the chatoyance, where you get that depth. And it's just so nice. And this is just with oil. There was no stain on here, no like secret method to make it pop and look a little richer or anything. But there you have just an oil finish on a figured wood. So you can get dynamic, wonderful results without using any kind of stains. And that's fine, but you're gonna get a lighter color. You're gonna get the color of the wood. But there are those times when you want to make that figure pop out a little more and maybe add an antiquing effect to the maple. Isn't it interesting that some woods like just come out like that? They just have this crazy figure in them. I'm not sure why the big leaf maple, and no one's really sure why it occurs in curly maple. However, there is a lot of suspicion that it actually has to do with compression of the tree. Paul Reed Smith in one of the videos was talking about this very topic, and he said that for some reason, when a large tree goes over in the woods, you will usually find a number of curly maple trees around that area. Now, I'm not sure why, but they've taken seeds of a really dynamic curly maple tree and planted them and had virtually none come up curly. So there's no understanding exactly why. It just occurs, and we're grateful when it does. But what is it? Why do you get that? Now, in one of the videos of the PRs, the color guy kept referring to the waviness in the grain as hard and softer wood on the material, and that's technically not correct. It's actually a rolling grain. So what you're seeing is like different angles of the grain. So when it rolls and then when it dives down, you're actually seeing like end grain facing upward. And so the finish goes in and it's going to be darker on end grain. Let me show you, let's just show you that really quick. If I just take a little bit of this stain, I'm just going to take some brown walnut. But look what happens. I'm going to just wipe it on top of the wood here, and it's fairly light. But then when I go on the end grain, let's just get it on there. I'm going to really give it equal treatment. Okay, do you see the difference? This is side grain, and then look how dark end grain is. End grain, let's do the side grain so you can see that's the same. All the grain is running this direction right here. So you're coming out to the end of the tubes on the end here. And because they're tubes, they draw in the finish like straws. And they absorb a lot more. And plus the light doesn't bounce off of end grain in the same way. So it reads darker because of the absorption and the light aspect. Well, that's the same thing that's going on when you stain it. You're seeing the finish is going deeper into the end grain angular figure that's coming out and rolling out. If you don't believe me, check this out. I'm gonna just split it down one of the edges, and let's see how it splits. Here we go. Okay, we just split a chunk off of there, and I want you to look at how it split. It did not split in a straight line like normally it would, but look at the rolling figure. Isn't that amazing? See that?
Wow.
That's the actual figure. That's what's going on. So it actually, if you could just trace the grain on that, it's normal grain, but you just keep seeing it at different angles. Now what's really mind-boggling to me is that it rolls not just in this direction. This is a little shaky. And check this out. The same thing happens in the other dimension. It's rolling all over the place from both angles. And you know it is because you see the roll on the edge and you see the roll on the face. So you're going to see the curly grain in both dimensions. It tends to occur greater out near the quarter sawn area of the wood. What about big leaf maple that has that blistered figure? Well, here's a piece right here. Not very big. Not very big of you, big leaf. But it's got some definite circular figure going on there. Let's split one of these and see what happens. First, I'm going to have to do it in 2 dimensions. I wish I should have got a thicker piece, but... So in this dimension, it's rolling subtly, not much. But let's split it this way. Now this is where you're seeing all that blistering. So it's not really a rolling pattern in the same way as curly maple. But let's see if I can split this down the middle. We'll take a gander. It's only going in a little bit. But look at that. Can you see that? Mm-hmm. It's different. It's like rolling, and it's like little mounds of wood. It's not the same kind of linear rolls. I can't get it to break because it's angling off, but check that out. You see that little bubble? There's like bubbles in there. Wow. And that is the difference. So it's very similar in bird's eye maple. You have like these bubbles are poking up grain, which makes the bird's eye accentuate. So that's actually what's going on. It's the way the fibers are approaching the surface and rolling down. In the quilted condition, it's actually like these bubbles of figure. It's just astounding of the variety that exists with different wood. Let's play around and make the most of it. We're going to explore some different treatments. First of all, I'm going to show you this kind of basic approach. This is what I have always done, and when I wanted a little color, because I didn't want a ton. I never really want a ton of color on curly maple. I mentioned earlier the penetrating oil finishes that go on that big leaf maple and made the figure really pop. What you want when it comes to staining the wood, in order to get the maximum pop of the figure, you want a stain that is fairly thin bodied that will really absorb in. It's the absorption into those fibers that makes them darker. Like when I wiped that water-based stain on the end of that piece, it really sucked right in. You don't want to use anything like a gel stain. So here's a gel stain, which I almost never use. I think I got this for a demo. But it's quite thick bodied. I mean, look at that. It's like barely moving in there. It's pretty old, but I think it's still good. But let me just get a piece of curly over here. And I've just wiped some on there. Look at it. Ugh. It's not a very good color. I'm going to wipe it on, and it brings up the figure a little bit. But because it's so thick, it's not absorbing into the wood. So I'll put that on, and then you wipe it off. And you can see that you got a little bit, but it's just kind of wetting the surface, and the color doesn't really penetrate. It's more of a finish or stain that you want to use when you're trying to mask issues, like sometimes people prefer to use it on woods that might be blotchy, like pine and sometimes cherry. And however, in this case, you're seeing some figure, but that's about the same as you'd get with wiping almost anything on. However, when you go to the water-based or alcohol-based, solvent-based type stains, you're going to get full absorption and color going in. Like that color just laid on the surface. It didn't really go in. So it's gel stains color by being more on the surface. That's why they have gel. They're meant to do that way. But they're not typically used by professional finishers. They just don't give you the rich color nor the control of a wider range of effects. So gel stains,
Are you going to discuss surface prep?
I'm only going to mention it tonight. I didn't want to go into the whole thing, but I do want to make sure all the planer marks are gone. So we don't want to see planer marks, of course. So all of these pieces, these samples that I'm going to show you, have been sanded. I did run them through my drum sander up to like 180. Then I gave them a little orbital and I hand sanded. I scraped some of them where needed. I was just trying to avoid having to do a lot of scraping or planing on this. So these were mostly sanded up to 220. And then I raised the grain lightly, and that was all. But what I want to show you first is this method here for the this kind of warm, traditional look on curly maple. And one of the things that they're big on at PRS Guitars, and I have done this occasionally, and I have noticed it, is they always dampen the guitar before applying the finish, so the stain. So just dampening it. I mean, I'm not putting much water on at all, but their comment is that it opens up the grain to be more receptive, to suck it in, to make the figure pop more, okay? It also slightly raises the grain. So I already raised the grain here, but it's no problem right now. So you can let it flash off a little. It's still going to have a dampness to it. And it also helps the stain apply more evenly. If you think about it, you put a little dampness on the fibers, so you're not going from wet to dead bone dry, and you can move it around a little more easily. You're not soaking it. You don't want to dilute your finish. You're just giving it a dampening effect. So it works fine under both water stains and alcohol stains, which I'm going to show both of here. So the kind of stains I'm using are primarily aniline dyes in the water-based, and then they also make them alcohol soluble. So you got to know what you have. And on the bottle, like if you get it in little bottles like this, these are from J.E. Moser's. This one says dark brown walnut, alcohol soluble. So it won't work in water. This one won't. So you've got that as a nice dye stain. So by dye, I mean it dissolves fully in the solvent. So it's just ultra clear, just like you would dye clothes. Pigmented stains have still the dust or the colorant floating around in them. Like a lot of artist paints have pigmented. They're heavier bodied and they add an opaqueness to the color, but it's subtle. But we want the purity of a full crystal clear color, so we want a dye stain that's ultra translucent and rich in color. So we're going to use the aniline dye stains. Water is the most common, easiest to use, but you have the issue of it taking longer to dry, and it raises the grain. But no big deal. We're going to raise the grain anyway. And the raising the grain is just like I just did. You'd dampen the surface, and then you'd feel it would be a little rough from the fibers after sanding will be standing up. So you lightly sand them off. And that's called raising the grain. You're basically taking that fuzziness off that the water creates. Now, after
Does it matter if the water's distilled? Or you kind of...
there are some people, like if you're doing a real light finish, you might want to have distilled water because some of your faucet water can introduce like little dark mineral colorants in reacting some of the aniline dyes you might use. But for the finishes that we're using, it's really no big deal. It's like you're going so dark, there's no way you'd even see anything like that. And I don't experience that. Our water here, I guess I know I can trust it. So we're just using the well water, and it's fine. But you might find that you might have issues with your water source. So if you want to be safe, yeah, you can use distilled water. So we'll be using the dye stains. They also make, in addition to the water soluble, alcohol soluble, there's an oil soluble. And so you can tint your varnishes. You know that because you can buy a lot of times, you can buy varnishes that are already colored. And what they have in them is an oil soluble stain or dye. And that dye is dissolved. And the way I usually dissolve those is not to stir the powder right into the oil finish, but stir it first into some paint thinner, some mineral spirits, and get it dissolved in there, and then add that little bit of thinner to the oil, and it'll mix in a lot easier. It won't be clumpy because it'll already be dissolved. Okay? All right, but we're going to just focus on alcohol and water-based for tonight. And that little dampening step I did on here to make it more receptive, it works with alcohol stains as well. Like I can go over it and not worry. The alcohol, the denatured alcohol in here is compatible with water. In fact, it's often diluted as window washer. To take your denatured alcohol, split it half and half with water, and you've got yourself a little window washing cleaner. You'd wash it down and the alcohol helps the water flash off. So I've got regular maple, and what I want to do first is lay down a maple dye. And I didn't have my lighter yellow, but I'm going to get the medium yellow maple. This is a water-based stain. So we're going to be kind of pushing these finishes a little bit because we don't have the luxury of a lot of time. I'm just going to drag that down. You see that nice amber color? Are you getting a lot of reflection, or are you seeing it well?
Oh, it's nice.
Oh, good. So you're seeing the good warmth. Mm-hmm. Now I'll go over it like that. And then you let it dry a little bit, right till it starts to look flashed over. This is the way I rush things sometimes. Got a heat gun.
So Tom, are you going to talk about finishing with polymerized tongue oil tonight? Curly and bird's eye maple.
Hold on a second.
Can't hear me.
I can hear you. I don't think they'd hear me well. No, I'm not going to talk about top coats. I'm just focusing on the staining tonight. But yeah, you could go right over a lot of these finishes with tongue oil. I am going to put on just a little bit of shellac at one point, but this is going to go along pretty fast right now. So here we go. I'm going to put on another coat, and you always want to go with 2 coats of your dye stain. It just makes it that much richer, and it doesn't darken it a whole lot, but you also make sure you got it fully covered, like you didn't miss anything. See little fibers of my...
And you're saying J.E. Moser, is that what you're saying?
I don't know who's the big seller now, but that's where some of my dye stains have come from.
J.E. Moser.
Yeah, and also I got a lot of finishes from Wood Finishing Enterprises.
We can put these in the link.
Yeah, J.E. Moser is just a product name, which I think you find at Woodworker Supply. I'm not sure. I think Woodcraft carries more the general finishes line, and they have a lot of already mixed. I prefer the powder because in mixing your own, and you get a good good result. That's the treatment there. Let me just blast this for a second. So you can see it's starting to dry, but the last areas that dry are those curls. See how there are dark lines?
Is aniline dye dry light fast, Tom?
They're pretty good, but they're not as good as the what are called metallic. Usually when you buy a finish, you can look into it and find out what the color fastness is. And I think it's a scale of 1 to 10. And I've got these metallic colors which are in trans tints. If you ever buy trans tint, this is another way you can make your dye stains. These are concentrated dyes, which you just put drops or teaspoons in to get the concentration you want. I'm going to use a little of that tonight. The trans tint is that metallic color, and it's very light fast. So if you don't want to use aniline dyes, like, make sure you got a good one that's going to work. So this technique, then I would lightly sand this, give it a little bit of 320. I'm going to just lightly hit it like this. This really should dry longer, but I just want to push this. So now I've got my color, and my color is nicely on there. I'd let it dry adequately, of course, usually a couple hours, depending on the season. And then I could put a coat of 1.5 pound coat of wax-free blonde shellac on here. I don't want orange because it'll add too much color. But you could, I mean, you could add orange if you wanted that. So I'm just going to drag this down. What I want to focus on tonight is actually the approach to staining and not so much all the technical. So I'm just going to let that dry a minute and set it aside, because we've got one more thing to do on that, and that's to add a glaze to it, which is going to give some antiquing and make the grain pop a little more, the curly maple grain. I want to introduce you to one of the guitar finishes. I have a brother-in-law who's a musician. One Christmas, when our families were together, you know, for the holidays, and we were talking, usually we get around to music or instruments and things like that, and we got on finishes somehow, and it was related to guitars, of course, and he was mentioning how much he loved a ruby-colored guitar. There was something about the ruby color of this certain dye. I don't know if it was a particular guitar, but he was just, for some reason he was into that. He goes, and he asked if I could do something like that. And I hadn't thought about doing anything like that. And maybe he doesn't even remember having this conversation. But I do, because I went and I actually bought the, J.E. Mosa had a red that they called Ruby. And I've had this for like 20 years. Yeah, from July 00. So it's 20 years old. So that's how long ago we had this conversation.
Wow.
And I did a little test board and everything. And the next time we get together, I brought it, I showed it to him. And it was just like, I'm not blaming him. I was kind of with it too. It wasn't as rich as I had hoped, you know. So I'm going to show you what this looks like. Let's just put a little of that ruby on a piece of this curly. So I just mix it up. It's a water-based stain. I'll just throw it on there. Look at it. It's kind of like a hot pink,
Wow.
right? Not that great. I mean, if you put that on a guitar, it would look kind of weak, right? Not very exciting. And pink, really, more or less ruby. Okay, now let's keep that in mind. I'm going to set this aside. I want to show you the technique that they're using at PRS Guitars. They call it fire red, but it's a lot like a ruby finish. First, we're going to dampen the surface.
It's okay that it's 20 years old, huh?
Yeah, it's dry. It's a dry powder form. That's one of the nice things about mixing your own. If it was in a liquid state, it wouldn't be worth much. They seem to last on the shelf about a year, and you want to have them in plastic containers. You don't want them touching or glass. You don't want the stain to be in contact with metal. So I use these little canning jars, as you can see. Like, they do have a metal lid, but it's like wax covered, so you don't get the contamination. It lasts quite a while in those. And I store my oil finishes a lot of times in those too. These little 4-ounce
Like a laboratory.
jars. Yeah. And I reuse them occasionally. All right, so we dampen those. And now we're going to add their first treatment of color and to make the fire red. And what color would you guess that is? We're going to start with black. And we're going to use an alcohol-based stain here. You could use water too. I've done some experimenting yesterday and today, and both react almost identically. So I'll use the alcohol so we get a quicker job of it here. But the black is going to go in and really go down into those pores, right? So let's do a little test over here. I'll do the black on this one. Now this is veneer, so I'm going to do it on one of the solid wood as well, just to see how it takes it. Okay.
Have you ever heard of Terry Misaki or Misachi?
Oh sure, yeah. I think
met
she's
her?
in the Southwest. Yeah, I met her once at what is that called? The Fine Woodworking Live event a few years ago. All right, I'm going to go down on here now.
She does a
Yeah, she's a very good finisher. She's written a book on finishes, and there's always a chapter, on dye stains and the types of stains, and I've learned a lot just from good books like that. One of my first that I've mentioned often is Bob Flexner's book on wood finishing. He does such a great job explaining. So you get the stain on, and then you want to let it soak, and I'm going to hit it one more time. So let's come back. We get that double hit on here. It seems more vibrant on the solid wood, doesn't it? I think it's because the veneer, you get kind of like it's it's glued and it's so thin, maybe some of the glue comes up through. I used very little glue when I was doing that because I didn't want that to happen. But I think we got pretty good penetration on this one. I'm going to use that. And then I'm going to put on the other board I have here with the veneered, I'm going to put instead of a black alcohol dye stain. That's pretty cool, huh?
Very cool.
So that's actually one of their guitar colors. You still have the golden color of the wood coming through, and they would be like their charcoal gray guitar. Now, on this piece, I'm going to use a dark brown walnut alcohol stain. So it'll give us a similar effect, except it's going to be almost like black, but it's going to have a brown tint to it. And we'll try that underneath more of a maple effect and see what we get. So see that little browner? Also kind of a greenish hue in the colorant, but it is a dark brown walnut, alcohol based. Isn't it crazy though? We're using black to start out to make a red. Black is also the color they use on their orange guitar. They start with the black, and I'll just go ahead and hit this again. Now, in order to bring up the contrast, Let's wipe this down. You want to really highlight the grain here. So what we're going to do is take away the color on the surface that's not in the curl. So there's a couple approaches.
Evan's curious if this is what David Lamb did with the black ice birch when you guys did that.
Similar, Evan, yeah. We actually got the dye on, we sprayed the dye on, and it was a different solvent. It wasn't alcohol-based, it was like a hotter, like flashing off solvent. And it ended up looking a lot like this, but instead it was the cracked ice and it was crotch figure. So, but it was too dark when we sprayed it on. So if it's too dark, there's no worries really. You can wipe it over with the solvent. So in that case, we used denatured alcohol. Was a solvent. It wasn't the only one, but it worked with that. I think there was some hotter solvents in there, like xylene, and you could also have used what's it? Begins with A, acetone. Pretty nasty, but anyway, we actually make acetone in our body, so it's not, I guess, that nasty. But. All right, so washing this down. And this is the brown, dark brown. So instead of the black into the curl, I'm getting the dark brown. All right, so once that's dried up a little bit, you can, now I could go over this with a little bit of denatured alcohol. That's going to pull color off the surface mostly, okay? You can see how it's taking it off the light, but it's remaining dark in the curly grain. It's the end grain. But you get, so you're pulling that off and you're getting some contrast that way, but the better way to get better contrast is actually to lightly sand it, and lightly sand it with 320 grit. This is what they do to their guitars. They start with the black and then lightly sand, and you're starting to see it get lighter there. And the trick is, on those guitars, is to, and here of course, is to lightly sand evenly enough so you don't end up blotchy. You don't want to take too much off, or it's going to look too bare. I'm going to kind of rush this so we can get the idea.
Do you have any thought on how this compares to Aqua Fortis they use on old flintlock rifles?
What was the word?
Aqua Fortis?
I don't, I'm sorry. It's probably similar. If you're talking about those rifles with the highly figured stocks with the curly, a lot of those had a nice dye stain on them of some sort, so I would not be surprised. Perhaps they started with black like this, but you can see what's happening. It's getting kind of light, and this method is more controllable. Like let's hit this and we'll see the difference. I mean, you're going to get more contrast with this method.
And this would work with the water-based options just as well?
Yeah, yep, the water, you'd lightly sand back that as well. But the alcohol dries faster, so I'm actually going a little too fast, but it is drying and it's pulling moisture out as well. So there, so I kind of sanded this end and I didn't there. Let me hit this a little bit and I'm going to sand more aggressively.
Yeah, just mention here, Tom has a full favorite finishing methods course. It's about 4 or 5 hours of coverage of lots of all the categories of finishing.
Yeah, we recorded that. I was doing that to a group, and that is available if you want to.
Available at our online courses page.
Yeah. Probably at least expensive, right?
Yeah, it's our least expensive, but it's
chock
full
full
of great information.
Yeah, good fundamentals. But that book, Understanding Wood Finishing by Bob Flexner, that's a great book to have on your shelf because anytime you get to a certain topic, you can flip to the chapter and just hone in on that, talking about a lot of different varnishes. And he's updated it over time as well. So it looks kind of powdery and not much is happening here, but I'm not going to spend, I'll just hit this one quick.
Yeah, we'll put all these links in the description after.
Okay, so I'm going to dust these off.
Have you used dye with an oil like Watco as a first coat?
No, I'm usually the first coat. I'm trying to just get color in there, not have a hardening kind of oil in there as well. But Watco's more coming into the range of the top coat, so you're getting a lot of these colors down on the wood. But see, that's fairly even. I could have done a little better job, but it's enough for what we're trying to show. So if you after you wipe the dust off, if you want to come back and get it more even, you just lightly go to the darker areas. And some of it is in the wood, so. But you want to get a nice kind of evenness to it and not sand it all off, okay? Doesn't look like much right now. But the next color for the fire red is not red. It's orange. So this is, I'm just going to use a straight orange water-based stain, and this is from Trans Tint. So this is the Trans Tint orange color in this bottle right here. So these things last a long time. It took a lot of drops, though. I should have teaspooned it out. A little over 3 ounces. I had like 150 drops before it got to the nice color. But this is rich. And here we go, on to our black.
Wow.
Let me turn it this way. Is it better that way?
That looks great. You're using paper towels. Do you ever use tack cloth?
Tack cloth is to remove the dust, like right before, like a surface finish. But yeah, I'm using paper towels. They're fine. A finishing friend of mine, like a real expert, used to always swear to use Bounty. But
Wow, that's beautiful.
yeah, so this is actually getting very close to their orange guitar finish. So isn't that interesting though? The black went in first. It added kind of a depth and richness to the grain and a much sharper contrast. And now we're adding this orange color over the top. I would usually let it dry a little more, but let's go one more. And you see, when it first goes on, you're like, whoa, that's really orange, but it's combining with, that's cool, huh?
Beautiful.
Is Lauren's favorite color still orange?
Copper orange. I don't know if that's her favorite, but
This is sort of coppery once I wipe the excess off. Man, you go through the paper towel. I just quarter them, so they go a long ways. All right, so there we go. We've got our base, our actual kind of like a burnt orange. On the other maple ones, this is more of a wood kind of format here. I'm going to use this alcohol-based orange. This orange color is a lot more like orange shellac, okay? So you're looking for that kind of orange. But on to the alcohol-based stain dark walnut, okay? So this is more of a furniture type color.
So James is asking, do you have to worry about double dipping as some of the black may then contaminate the orange?
Not really. I'm always trying to, yeah, you see it does wipe it off a little bit, but you can rotate. I guess if it was really heavy, I would, but it's pretty subtle. That's why I'm always using new ones, but isn't that nice? So that's kind of like a gun stock, you know, you're seeing that kind of translucent and gray color. So this has like an amber, it looks more amber on here than orange, so nice color, nice base. I'll use a little on this one. Let's see what this looks like.
What would you recommend to allow the green to pop but not change the color, like make it more the natural color of the wood?
Well, you can, if you just use natural oil-based finish, you're going to get some color pop, you know. You're going to get some, but you're not going to get as much. Like if you use a mild kind of aniline dye, like I did on that first one, you will get some pop. But look at that. Doesn't that look like a really nice antique kind of maple piece? Now I'm not done with that. There's actually a little more you can do, but let's wipe that down. So it's kind of this complexity of layering that you're getting. That first dark layer is mainly meant, it's intended for the curly grain to make that pop. And it gives some kind of age looking to it as well. So there we have more of the wood grain. Let's go back to our guitar. Finally, to apply the ruby red. Okay, so the ruby red, or the red in general, it could be just red, goes over the orange now after the black. Let me revisit this red. Okay, here I'm gonna get the red going again on this, so we can really see what this was like. Okay, that's our ruby red by itself. Okay, so we've got black, orange, and here goes the ruby red.
Are you seeing a reduction of chatoyance, Tom?
Well, it's dry. That'll come up when the top coats go on. That's when that really comes alive. It's not right now.
That's amazing.
So this is giving us a much kind of richer red color. Now let me dry this off a little. I've got another orange one over there that was drying earlier. Here we go. I'm going to put the red on this, see if it's any better by not rushing it so much. But what a difference to the ruby red, right? By itself. So this one I sanded a little bit more and got the orange on it. So you're getting this different type of red. You can almost pick up the fiery orange underneath it, and you're getting that nice combination of color. Wipe that down.
Steve's asking, where do you store all your finishing materials?
In my finishing room, I got some cabinets down there, and I usually have a mess on the table. So this one you can see, this is not quite dry, but I sanded this one a little more, took my time with it a little more. This one not as much, but you still get a very similar appearance. But that's pretty sweet. We're getting that nice look. I'm going to throw a little shellac on there right in a couple minutes to kind of wrap it up, just so we can see what that looks like. But before that, I'm going to just hit these really quick, even though it's alcohol.
Do you use aniline dye on zebra wood, Tom?
Sure. Zebra wood, though, you know, it's already got such a cool color. I don't know. You might want to tint it a little, but it has like such an incredible coloration to it already. You might want to tint it and get it warmer, like an amber tone or something.
Oh, the colors.
Okay, so let's go. Oh, this one. I meant to put some orange sheet on that. Let me just hit that really quick. This was black. Oh, I know what I was actually going to put the orange on here, but let's just try the orange G over black and contrast it to the brown base one. So down here I didn't sand, but anyway, you're getting the idea how to make a real tiger. I mean, this is almost, like that orange almost felt like a tiger skin, doesn't it? Okay, when you put on the top coat, that's when things really start to come to full aliveness, or chatoyance and depth and quality, and it makes the color really pop. Now we're rushing it here, so we're not going to get the real full beauty, but I think it'll look nice enough on the camera. And I'm only putting one thin coat of 1.5 pounds wax-free shellac. Just right before I do that, I want to show you on our initial sample. Remember, this was the simple kind of light version on curly maple, not the dark antique like we're doing here, but the lighter version. I just put the medium yellow maple colorant, and then I applied that a couple times, and then lightly sanded, and then I put that coat of shellac right on there. And so the shellac is sealing in the color, so we're going to retain that as like a background color. And here you can use what are called glazing stains, and I'm going to just use the old Mohawk, and this is the burnt umber glaze. It's a nice color. The umber is a little reddish, but this Mohawk is nice because it's got a browner red. Why don't I just say that? This is going to be laying on top of the finish, but some of it gets captured on the finish itself because the grain is not totally sealed. It's only a wash coat, like a thin 1 to 1.5 pounds cut of shellac. So just let that sit for a minute, and we'll wipe that right off. So you see how this is enhancing the grain a little more. See how it's looking darker in the grain from the glaze, but it's not, it's tinting, like giving the surface an antique look, similar to that, see? So now you usually let that dry about an hour or two, and then we'd coat it with the wax-free. So let's just go over these with the wax-free blonde shellac.
Wow.
So now you're starting to see the variation in the true color. I could have wiped over this with a yellow too, and brought out a little more yellow tone. I could actually use a more amber shellac and bring out a little more yellows in this. But that's a tigery red now. And let's try this one over here. Should get a similar but lighter result here. That's pretty nice. And now let's go to our dark brown alcohol first, and then we put on the orange G. I'm going to get a tiny bit of red, but I don't think it'll matter. So this is giving us kind of a classic antique looking, old aged kind of curly maple. Let's see how it looks on this one. Making that figure pop even darker than normal. That's nice, huh? See, now once I seal this in, I could go over it with, if I wanted to push it a little, I could put a glaze on this as well and add even more complexity to it. This grain's kind of funky. Not as nice as that other board. And I kind of rushed that sanding job, so not so rich. Let's just lastly put a little on this ruby red. Wow, that's pretty bad, huh? But look what a difference you get when you do a little bit of start work and you create more of a complex color. So next time you're in a guitar store, check out the PRS guitars. I think you'll be stunned how rich and beautiful the colors are. And they really have it down. They're not rushing it. It would take me a little more. There's a whole department of just researching colors and practicing this all the time. So I had a good piece of time yesterday and today to mess around with it. But I hope you enjoyed that. That's kind of a different way of approaching bringing out the maximum figure in wood. I was going to do a little on the big leaf maple because that's pretty interesting too. Here's a little sample that I had done earlier. Let's just put some, I have a number of colors on here. So you can see what happens with big leaf maple. You get a similar deal going on there with the chatoyance. This end looked really incredible when,
that's cool.
So I got too much red in there. So it's kind of like you want to push it a little more amber or whatever. You can do it sometimes in the top coat, or you can add a step where maybe you put a yellow dye stain on there in addition.
What about curly walnut, Tom? How do you bring that out?
Good question. I don't really like to stain walnut much, but usually I'm putting an amber stain on there. But I think if I was going to, I would just put like an amber or a light walnut color, and I would wipe over and then then just sand it back. And then usually just amber color on curly walnut is great. And curly walnut is fairly rare, so you're fortunate if you grab a piece of that. But it's the same principle. So you're trying to get a darker color into the grain to make it pop more. So, and then I would just make sure I sanded it nice so I get back to the natural walnut on the surface as much as possible. And then I just like amber shellac on walnut. It's just so beautiful and brings out the natural warmth of the wood. So, all right, everybody. Hey, if you enjoy this content and you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? We have a lot of fun here, and we would just let you know when we have new videos coming out. It just comes out, especially if you ring that bell. But
Click that like button before you go.
Yeah, and if any of you want to go deeper with our content, head on over to epicwoodworking.com and get on our mailing list. And we just let you know when we have new offers, when we have new courses. Those on our mailing list get usually like early notice and special deals and all that. So we'd love to have you join our mailing list over at epicwoodworking.com. Well, thanks so much again for hanging out with us here in the shop. It's been a great night. I hope that wet your whistle for exploration in new colors and rich colors to your already rich work. So on behalf of the camera lady and myself, we'll look forward to seeing you next time.